Hey, this is Greg, and welcome to part one of a two-part series I'm going to be doing on the new Canva Sheets feature. Now, I'm breaking this into two parts because I think Canva Sheets is a huge win for Canva users, but I really see two sort of obvious ways you can use it, obvious benefits for Canva users. And the first is just the ability to work with data and to visually display that data in some cool and interesting ways. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. We're going to talk about how you can import data, how you can work with data, how you can turn it into really cool visuals, because this is a huge win, and I think this is going to be a huge part of the way you might use Canva Sheets. Now, the second part is the ability to take Canva Sheets and then to hook that up with your content, and then with AI tools like the background remover, the bulk create tool, the magic resize tool, and to suddenly use Canva Sheets in combination with those other things to really supercharge your content creation, your social media calendar. So that's the second way I think people are going to really benefit from Canva Sheets. And I'll be talking about that in part two of this tutorial. So as soon as part two is available, I will link it up in the description below and possibly up above there. So if it's not up there yet, or if I don't have that link yet, it will be coming out soon. But in this part one, we're talking about data visualization. So how do you bring data into Canva Sheets? How do you start to work with that data? How do you start to build out really cool visuals? How can you incorporate those visuals into your presentation and other things? Because this is one of the ways you really can benefit from this new Canva Sheets feature. All right, so if you're ready, let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so the basics. What are Canva Sheets and where can you find them? Well, Canva Sheets were announced at the April 10th Canva Create event, and they are Canva's answer to spreadsheets. So think Microsoft Excel, think Google Sheets. Now suddenly we have spreadsheets in Canva. Now they call this Sheets, and you'll see this sheet option on the homepage if you've unlocked that new version of Canva. Now, Canva is releasing this to a limited number of people at first, so if you didn't get in, you might be on a wait list, but all these features are going to be rolled out soon if you don't have them already, so be patient, and you will soon get this sheet option in Canva. You can also search up here for sheet, but what you can do is now launch a spreadsheet in Canva. So it's going to look a little something like this. Let me just close this menu so we can see everything on screen here. Now, of course, if you start another project type, you know another new Canva feature is the ability to come in here and add any kind of design you want. So you don't have to have just one particular format or size page in a Canva design document. You can have anything you want. So you can also put whiteboards in here. You can also put something different, so social media assets in here, so maybe an Instagram reel. So you can do all this, and if you have a project open that might be a presentation or something, you can also add a sheet that way. So you can come on here and add a sheet. Okay, so you can launch it from the home screen by using that sheet option, or you can add it to another type of project just by using this drop down here, finding the sheet option, and then boom, just like that, you have a spreadsheet here in Canva. So just like most spreadsheets, you can come in here and you can enter numbers. So let me just paste a bunch of numbers in here real quick. You can also let Canva do that for you. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to do this and select all this. And then I'll come up here on the actions menu. I'm going to choose Magic Write and I'm going to say fill with random numbers. Now, of course, you would normally be bringing in your own data set, something that you actually want to work with, something that's meaningful, but just to show you that, yes, you can have Magic Write help out here, I'm just going to go ahead and do that very quickly just so we have some numbers to work with. Now, if you're not familiar with spreadsheets, you may just have to watch a few spreadsheet tutorials sort of to get used to spreadsheet basics to learn your way around in here. Now, if you worked in Excel before or Google Sheets or something like that, you're probably going to be pretty comfortable to begin with. So I also might want a header column here. So if I just went up here and select this row, but then I could come on down here by right-clicking on my mouse and then choosing add a row above, suddenly I have another row here, and maybe I would create column headers. So we could just call this num1, and then of course maybe num2, and so on. Okay, so we have a header row now. And then, of course, you can select different numbers just by clicking on a cell. So if I'm clicking on a cell, then suddenly I can type, change what's in that cell, work with that cell. I can also select a whole bunch of cells at once. So if I wanted to, I could click and drag out and select this entire first row here, and then come up here and add some formatting. Maybe I want it to be bold. Maybe I want it to be even bigger. So again, you can select one cell, you can select multiple cells just by clicking and dragging, by clicking and then shift clicking. So all the normal normal ways you might be used to making selections here in Canva. Now, what else can you do? Well, we have functions in here just like you have functions in a regular spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead and type sum for a new column header here. So let me type sum again. And then of course, if I like this formatting here, I could copy this cell. So I could hit Control C. And then when I come over to paste it here, I'm actually going to right click and choose paste special. I don't want to copy the value itself, just the format. So just format only, and boom, I've copied that format over. So lots of different ways you can format and do things like that. I'm not going to spend tons of time on those little things because the best way to learn those is just playing around. We're going to get down to things that really matter. So here we go. We got the sum here. So sum, and then you also can access formulas here. So you're used to this if you work in spreadsheets. So I'm just going to type the equal sign while I'm in this cell. And now that I have equal, you see all these formulas start to pop up. Well, I can choose sum, and then it wants me to define what rows. So I can just click and drag all these. And now I'm going to sum all those. I'll hit enter. Now, if I click on this cell here, we can see up here in this top left corner that it actually has a formula here. So in this cell, we're saying it equals sum A2 to G2. Now, if you're familiar with spreadsheets, you're probably familiar with this sort of cell reference, but basically each cell in here can be identified by the column it's in, which has a letter, and then which row it's in, which has a number. So we can see right here, the data starts in column A, row 2. So this is cell A2. And then what this means, basically, when you see this colon and then another number, it's defining the whole range of this selection. So it started here at A2, but then it goes all the way to G2. So if I go to G and I come down to 1, 2, right here. So this range here is defined in this function. So if you want to refer to a single cell, you're going to take that letter and number. But if you want to refer to a range of cells, then you're going to start with whatever cell is in the upper left, and you're going to take that, then you're going to include that little colon, and then in the bottom right, you're going to find the next cell, and that's going to, again, be a letter and a number. But usually you don't have to remember this because usually you're just going to be choosing one of those predefined functions, and then it's going to do the work for you. Now you can also copy references and functions like this. So if I copy this sum here, so if I just click on that cell, hit Control C to copy, then I can select all these other cells here, hit Control V, and it's pasting that formula into those. Not only is it pasting the formula, it's smart enough to notice that it's getting shifted down a row, and it's changing the sort of cell references in the function. So before I was referencing row 2, but then you notice here it references row 3, here it references row 4, and so on. If you worked in spreadsheets before, you know that's a nice feature. It's smart enough to understand when you copy and paste that you want to shift that value. Okay, now maybe we wanted something else here, so let me just copy this so we get the sort of the formatting, but then I'll come over here and I'll click on this cell and let's just type AVG for average, and then in here we're going to go under equals, and again we're going to choose math functions. Now average is what I want right here, but just so you see, there are lots and lots of functions if you click that all button at the bottom, so you really have a lot of functions to choose from in here. But I'm going to go back up and just choose average, and you can also start to type something as you're over top of a cell after you hit the equal sign, and it'll start to search through functions for you. But I'm going to choose average, and once again I'm going to define the range as this A through G here from my columns, and then hit enter, and so now I'm taking the average. So Control C to copy that, Control V to paste it down the sheet. So just like that, easy. And of course, there are different ways of selecting cells in here. So as mentioned, you just click on any cell to select that cell. You can obviously just instantly type into it. If you have it highlighted and you hit delete, you'll delete things in that cell. And you can also shift click. So if I click up here and then I shift and click down here, I'm selecting that entire sort of cell block. So the upper left column, everything down to the bottom right. So you can select ranges that way. If you just want to select individual cells, but then select some other individual cells, you can use that control key. So now I can control and select different cells. And so let's just say I wanted to select this cell and maybe this cell and this cell. And now that they're all selected, I could do different things, and I'd be applying that change to just those columns. So go ahead and make it a little bigger there. And as mentioned, you have all those pre-made functions, but you can also make your own sort of mathematical equations in here. So let's just say I wanted to add this number, and this number. Well, I could just start by typing equals. And then once I've started to type equals, I could click on other cells to reference those cells. So I could click on this one and then come up here and type a plus symbol, and then go ahead and click on this one again up here and do a plus sign again, and then click on this last one, and then once you're done, do the equal sign, and now you can see it's summing those three numbers together. Okay, so I'm not going to go really farther on all these little intricacies of working with spreadsheets, because the best way to learn those is just to play around. But now I want to jump in here and show you the real power of this and start sort of working with a data set, because usually what's going to happen is you might have a data set that you want to use, you want to get some insights from, you want to use in a presentation, you want to create some cool visuals from that data. That's what we're going to get into now, because I don't think spreadsheets in Canva like this are going to take the place of Excel or Google Sheets when it comes to crunching numbers, because you already have applications that are really good at that. That's not necessarily going to be the strength of Canva, but the strength of Canva is going to be creating those visuals, being able to incorporate those in visuals in Canva presentations and things like that. So that's what we're going to talk about now. How do we work with a data set? How do we create some of these really, really cool visuals very quickly? And then how can we use those sort of in presentations and in our content? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click the plus icon at the bottom to create a new sheet. Now, as I mentioned before, you can choose any content type like this, but if you just choose the plus icon, then whatever page you're on, it's just going to duplicate that content type. So if this was a whiteboard, it would create a new whiteboard. If it was an Instagram reel, it would create an Instagram reel. But since I have a sheet here, if I hit the plus icon, it's just going to create a new sheet. So how do we import data? As I showed you on the last sheet, you can have Canva randomly create stuff for you using the Canva Write tool and fill content. Now, usually you would try to give it a specific idea of what you're trying to create, but a lot of times you're going to have a data set that you already want to work with, and that's when you're going to need to import that into Canva, into your Canva sheet. So to do that, you come up under this actions menu. Now there's lots of great stuff in this action menu. A lot of this we're going to talk about in part 2 when we talk about really supercharging your content creation. But the important thing we're talking about here under the actions menu is the ability to import data. So if you just scroll down here, you're going to find import data at the bottom of this actions menu. So we're going to go ahead and choose import. Now, there are some services that you can link directly up with Canva here. So if you have a Google Analytics account, you can link up and bring in your Google Analytics data. And then there's also some other ones here, HubSpot, World Bank Statistics. But I think a lot of the time you're going to be uploading your own data. So what I'm going to do is choose upload data. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in this Indiana Fever 2024 stats. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring this in. Now, when you import data, you can either bring in an Excel spreadsheet or you can bring in a comma separated value file. This is a spreadsheet here, so I'm just going to go ahead and open this and give it a second. You'll see your uploads tab starts to churn here, so it actually gets uploaded to Canva. Then you have to apply it to your page. So I'm just going to click on this. It'll say, do I want to replace the current page or add as a new page? Well, in this case, I will just replace the current page, and then boom, suddenly that spreadsheet data I have here inside of Canva. Now, these are just stats I compiled from the ESPN WNBA website, specifically here for the Indiana Fever team, but you can pull data from wherever you want. Now, of course, you might want to reference this, so make sure you give credit when you're using data. Make sure you use it in appropriate fashion. And since we're doing this for educational purposes, I totally feel confident just compiling some data here and pulling it in. So we're going to be looking at this just to work through a few examples. So this data set is just the statistics from last WNBA season for the Indiana Fever team. So it's got the player name here, games played, games started, points scored, rebounds, assists, steals, and so on. So we're going to work with some of this data. So as mentioned, you can make selections just by clicking and dragging. I'm not so interested with the totals row here, but what I'm going to do is to get all this player data, I'm just going to click and select, also selecting my header row, and then I'm going to show you how easily you can take this data and start to create some really cool visuals. So I have everything selected there. Now I'm just going to come up to this magic charts option. So you'll also find this under the actions menu here, but it has its own little icon right here. So I'm going to choose magic charts. So anytime you have some of your data selected and you select magic charts like that, it's going to go ahead and suggest to you a chart type and a way to visualize your data. Now, if you don't like what it's selected here, you can come in here and find all kinds of chart types, so you can find anything you want here. But let me just go back to that default options that was showing me before. And anytime you have a chart that you want to add, you can just click and drag it right out onto screen. Now, once you add it onto screen, you can keep it here on this screen, but I can also just put it on any other slide in any other presentation. So let me just go ahead and grab this, and I'm going to hit Control C to copy, and I'm going to go ahead and create a blank presentation slide. And then I'm just going to go ahead and hit Control V to paste in a copy of that. And once I do now I can resize this way to make it bigger. I can resize that way. I can get it to fill my whole screen here. And now we can actually come in and start to work with this data, start to make changes with this data to create the type of visual we want to create. And so this is linked to that live data. Even though the live data is back in the sheet, this is linked to that live data. So let me click back on this chart. If I go under this chart and we go under Edit, anytime you do that, you can see the source here. So we can see that num1 sheet. And if I were to come in here and click on that, I could come in here and adjust this selection, make a new selection if I wanted to leave out some players. So you can come in and you can adjust the data that the chart is referring to anytime you want to. I'm going to go ahead and click Done. Now, something else you can do here is you can right click and you can go ahead and you can disconnect from source if you just want to have that final visual and protect it from any changes you want to make in that spreadsheet. You can do that. You can also open a link source. So lots of different ways you can work with data here. Okay, so now that we have this done, let's go ahead and make a little bit more sense of this. So we have some labels so we can see. Right now it's showing game started, minutes, points, points for. That's not necessarily what I want to show on this chart. So let's go in here now and tell it specifically what we want on this chart so that we create the visual we want to create. Okay, so I'm going to click on the chart to select it. Again, you see this blue outline around it, just like you do with other Canva elements, lets you know it's selected. And then you have the edit option up here. Now you also have some other options you can play around with. You can add padding, you can add spacing. So padding around the outside of the chart elements. You're not necessarily seeing that much because white is the color of my chart and the color of my background. But if I made the background sort of grayish, and now I come in and play with that padding, you can see what that padding option is doing here in terms of the chart. And then of course you have other spacing options in here, so the spacing of columns, so little things you can come in here, play around with and adjust. And of course also you have the colors on your chart, so maybe you wanted to make this orange and so on and so forth. But the biggest thing is, how do we affect what data is actually being shown on the chart? Because you might make a selection of data, but maybe not all of that is data you want to show in the chart. So we're going to click on this, and then you're going to use this edit option right here. So when I go under the edit now, we have this data menu and we have this customize option. So let's start here under the data menu. And of course, on the fly, you can also come in here and change the type of chart you want. So if you wanted it to be a stacked bar chart, you could change it. But let's go ahead and switch it back to a bar chart. But again, you can come in here on the fly. You can change the type of chart that you're seeing. So play around and get to know these chart types. There really are tons of cool options. Okay, as mentioned here, this is the data source. So you can come in here and change that if you need to. Now labels, what do you want to actually show? Well, it's showing the name of the player. That is appropriate to me, but we could come in here had we wanted it to be something different, and we could come in and change what the label here is on the x-axis. But we're going to go ahead and leave that to name because that makes the most sense. So we have our name of the player there as that value on the x-axis, but then, okay, what values are we showing? Right now it's showing games played through points, but we want to come in here and make some adjustments. So we can come in here and start to turn things off. So I don't want to show games played or games started. Maybe I'm really just interested in points, rebounds, and assists. So there's points. Come down there and make sure rebounds is selected, assist is selected, and I'll turn off this points for. So just like that, I've turned off the things I don't want, and I've turned on the things I do want. Now I think I messed with the spacing a little bit, and maybe I'm not getting the spacing I want in between players. So let me just come back here real quick again and just adjust the spacing a little bit more, just so we get some separation between the different players here. Now, as I mentioned, you can come up here and adjust chart colors, but you also do have this color by option here at the bottom of the edit menu. And you might not use this a lot of the time, but if you come under here, you'll notice that name is an option. And since we're using the name down here as that value on the x-axis here, if I color by name, then suddenly it's going to change the color scheme and give each of these items a different color. Okay, so again, you can hit Control Z if you don't like that to step back to where you were. But it all depends on just what sort of visual you're looking to create. You also have this aggregate data, and you're not going to use that a lot of the time. I'm not going to cover that here. You can fool around with that if you want. So that is under the data menu here, but of course you can also come under this customize menu here, and here's where you get into those x-axis label, that legend you might want to apply. So right now the legend is on the top. It's just showing you what these different values are and what color represents them. So you can turn that legend on and off if you want. You also have a label here. Again, we're using the name for that x-axis, but if you want to go ahead and have a y-axis label too, you can come under here and you can see right now it doesn't have a total, but so that would be points, rebounds, and assists. So again, come in here and adjust things the way you want. Now it also has these tick values 0, 5, 10, 20. Usually just leaving those on the auto setting is going to be the way to go, but you can also come down here and fool around with making sort of less increments there on the left. So you'll notice as I add one at a time, it's slowly going to add more and more increments over here and more of these sort of grid lines. So I could really ramp that up if I wanted to, but again, usually just leaving that to auto is the way to go. So if I just delete that, it's going to put it back to auto and choose what it thinks is best there. So that's grid lines, and you can also turn grid lines on and off here using this option there. What else did I miss here? We didn't talk about sort of this data labels here. So right now, by default, they're just going to be auto aligned here. Again, that makes sense. But if you want to come in here and change the positioning of where sort of different labels and stuff appear, you can come in here and start to fool around and make adjustments here under these settings. So those are all very cool things. Now, what else did I miss in here? So source, data source, this is good if you have data that you're using from somewhere and you want to give credit. For example, this is from ESPN, so I could type in ESPN WNBA stats or something like that. And then I could provide a website link here. So I'm just using this for educational purposes. Of course, you always want to be conscientious of how you're using data. Make sure it's appropriate. Make sure you give credit to that data source. So that's what I'd want to do here using this data. Other option that's really cool is this new filter option at the bottom. So you see on this chart here, I am charting all at once, points, rebounds, and assists, each with a different bar value. However, I could come down under this filter option here. I could choose add, and then suddenly in here, I can set different styling. So you can do buttons, or you can do a range slider. I think I would want it to be buttons in this case. Again, using column headers, select the data. You can come in here and select whatever, but I'm just going to leave it by default there, column headers, because that is what's giving me sort of what I want in terms of points, rebounds, and assists for the options up here. And now as I click on the different ones, suddenly now I can chart just points, or I can see just rebounds, or I can see just assist. Again, you can remove filters if you don't like it. You can come back here and you can add different filters. So this filter option is really cool, just to suddenly take a whole bunch of data and then be able to chart it in a bunch of different ways, and then very quickly be able to jump between those different visual displays of your data. So that filter option is super cool. Now, this is all just getting into these options we have for adding labels and doing things with the default Canva Sheet functionality. However, remember, you still have your entire Canva bag of tricks and sets of tools, so you can very easily do other things. Just as an example here, if I click on the chart, I can come in here and maybe I can start to adjust the size here, and everything's going to be 18 pixels. But I really want some different sizes for my axis labels and for my chart title. So that might be something that I come in here and I take total control of just by doing that on my own. So let me just show you what I mean. First of all, let's take this chart. Let's resize it down for a second. I'm actually going to back out of this filter option, so I'm going to remove that from now. So let me just come on back under the edit menu. I'm going to go back under settings, and I'm going to just go ahead and remove this filters for now. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and take this filter setup, and I'm going to go ahead and remove this. So remove this filter just so I'm back to this chart. Now, let's say this is my chart. Maybe I want my page background to also just be white, so I'll make that white. I'm going to resize this chart to something like this, putting it right there. But then maybe I want to add my own title. Well, I can just use regular Canva text for that. So I could go ahead and click on the text value, add a heading, bring this heading up top here, center it over my chart, and then type out something like 2024 Indiana Fever stats. So again, you can really come in here and you can do whatever you want with the Canva tools. I could add a graphic behind this. So you're combining this new feature we have, Canva Sheets, and all the visual things you can do with that to empower your data, to visualize your data. And now remember also, you still can use all these traditional Canvas tools you're familiar with. Now, this was sort of a basic example looking at the Indiana Fever stats, but let me show you how you can get even more complicated and bring in even larger data sets, and then how you can really make use of those to create some cool things, and how maybe you would incorporate that in a presentation or something like that. Okay, so here I am in another Canva design document, and once again I've imported that Indiana Fever data, and I even have a larger data set in here. So we're going to work through a couple examples with this smaller data set and a larger data set, just to show you now how you can really empower visuals, empower your presentations just by taking this data and really putting it to work for you, and also combining it with all the traditional tools and techniques you have in Canva. So let's take this for example. So first of all, if I go to this next page here, we can see that I have a chart here, and it's actually using this data here. And if I click on this, this is actually a Canva sheet. So it's not a traditional Canva table, it's actually a sheet. Well, if I go to this first spreadsheet here, if you just open a spreadsheet type, that page is not resizable. If I come here and I add a sheet this way, this sheet that I add, it's not going to be resizable. But you can have resizable sheets within your document, and I find them useful, especially if you're working with maybe a smaller data set and you want to sort of show it sort of in table format, but still be able to on the fly create these types of charts. Let me show you what I did to create that. So if I go under my elements menu, instead of adding something this way, and I go under elements and I search for sheet, well, initially, I'm not going to see the results I want here, but that's because I'm on a spreadsheet here. Leaving this as sheet, if I just click over onto one of my presentation slides, now, suddenly, look at all these. These are all sheets. So I can click on one of these and we can see that, yes, this is a spreadsheet. I can come in here. I can access all those formulas. I can do all the things I can do normally with sheets. And that's what this is here. This is just a sheet. I've just added some formatting and styling to it so it'll look good as part of a presentation. Now, getting rid of this sheet, sometimes it's tricky to select the whole sheet. So I'm just going to click off of this, go under the position menu. There it is. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. So we'll get rid of that sheet. But now suddenly on this page, you can see how nice you can stylize your data for things like presentations or documents you're sending around. So let's just go ahead into presentation mode here and take a look at a couple of the graphics I've created, just taking some of this data from this basic data set here. Okay, so here we are in presentation view. Here's that spreadsheet. Pretty boring, right? Well, what about now? What about now? What about now? So you really can take data sets and turn them into these really cool visuals. Visuals that tell a story, and that's when your data becomes really powerful. So if I back it up here, we're looking at the Indiana Fever season. Well, now we're looking at the scoring. We can see Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston. Those were the big three. If you watched the Fever last season, you know. Again, here, team assists. Caitlin Clark, 8.4. It led the NBA in assists. Rebounding. Aaliyah Boston, bow, bow, bow. If you know, you know. Had to throw that in there. And of course, this is the WNBA because I love the WNBA. I think it's great. But you can chart anything you want. These could be your sales numbers. This can be something you're interested in, something you're presenting to people, something you want to tell a story with. All right, let's move it forward. Let's look at one more example, looking at an even bigger data set and see how you can really tell this story with your data and with these Canva tools. Okay, so let me just move it forward to the next presentation slide. Okay, another data set. Now here's another data set, again WNBA stats, but this time I pulled down and compiled all the different team stats from the WNBA last year. So this is every player in the WNBA last year for all those statistics we were just looking at for the one team. Now we're looking at them across all teams. So all I did was bring this in, then I selected all the data, and then very quickly, Magic Charts with one click. Look what Magic Charts created for me. Boom, like this. Now I had to go in there and do a little bit of work telling it what I wanted it to plot. So if we click on a bubble here, we can see it has points, assists, and rebounds. So it's actually assist here on this axis. This is actually the point axis. And then I set it up so the size of the bubble is actually representative of the number of rebounds a player has. But then the team colors, so all these different colors represent a different team in the WNBA. So there is actually tons and tons of data on this chart. And instead of having that boring spreadsheet, suddenly we have a visual that's really starting to tell a story. Because who are these circles that are separating themselves on this chart? Well, I can guarantee you these are some of the star players in the WNBA. What about this dot up here? Someone who's crushing it in assists and rebounds and also averaging 10 points a game. Well, that's Alyssa Thomas, a yearly MVP contender, great player. What about over here? Somebody who led the league in assists, also crushing it in points scored. Well, that is Caitlin Clark. Come over here, someone who's leading the league in scoring. Who is that? Also crushing it and rebounding, A'ja Wilson. You know she was the league MVP last year if you watched. Okay, somebody else here. Huge circle way up here. Nafisa Collier. Again, league all-star every year. What's this huge circle down here? Somebody absolutely crushing it in a rebound. Well, Angel Reese, you know, as a rookie, she led the league in rebounding last year. So suddenly we're getting something that's telling a story just by bringing in that data and letting it use magic charts to on the fly create that as a cool visual. We can choose between the different chart types. We can start to tell it what we want to chart, and then we can start to bring in all those other Canva things we know how to do to tell a better story. So let me progress through the slides here and show you how I made this an even better visual. So going to the next slide here, let me just click on this onto the next slide. Now suddenly here, I just wanted to show you here that on this one here, you'll notice that if I hover over these, I'm no longer getting that rollover pop-up that's giving me the player stats. And the reason why I did that is I just wanted to teach you that sometimes when you have a chart hooked up to a lot of live data, it can start to become a little bit more clunky. So if you're going and using a presentation and using that data and you want to be able to do some cool things on the fly with animations, you might sometimes want to download a chart as a PNG and then add some animation on top of it. So again, I can go back to this screen here if I wanted to have this roll over and do all that stuff. But since that was making it a little clunky with some of those animations, I went ahead and saved this page as a PNG graphic. And then I brought that graphic into some other presentation slides, and we'll see how I started to layer some other things on top of it. So again, here we go. Suddenly I've added in my own labels here. I have my own heading here. I have assist point per game. I was able to use different font sizes because I went ahead and just used regular Canva text instead of using those specific Canva charts features. So remember, you have all those Canva Sheets features, but then hey, combine it with all the other stuff you know in Canva. Go ahead and transition to another slide. I'm using the match and move feature to have this transition and to bring in this graphic showing, hey, that's Caitlin Clark up here. Let's do another one here. Go into the next slide. Boom, bring it in. A'ja Wilson right there. Another one. Boom, Angel Reese down here. So you can start to create these cool animations and tell a story with your data. Now, all these stats came from the ESPN, so I have the data source here that links out to ESPN. These graphics I also grabbed from there. Again, be careful when you use content. You don't want to take pictures, obviously, and print your own t-shirts. I don't have copyright rights for this, but using a small graphic for educational purposes like that, I feel confident that falls under fair use. Just make sure you're being smart. Don't go out there and steal people's content. Use things in a smart, conscientious, ethical way. But look at this cool story. So what cool story could you tell with your data? So start playing around with this Canva Sheet feature and see what cool things, what cool visuals you can create. If you create something that's really cool and you want to share it, feel free to create a shareable link and you can drop that in the comments down below. Also in the comments down below, if you have any questions at all about Sheets, go ahead and drop them in there and I will answer as many as I can. And remember, this is part one of a two-part tutorial on Canva Sheets. So in the second part, I'm going to talk about how you can use Canva Sheets to supercharge your content creation, your social media marketing. So that's all coming up in part two. And the best way to stay up to date on this channel and what is coming out on this channel is subscribing to this channel and also subscribing to my Canva newsletter. That's totally free, so I'll put that in the first pinned comment down below. You can follow that link. You can sign up for my newsletter. I'll also provide a link to a free resource page for anybody who signs up to my Canva newsletter. I have a lot of Canva related resources I give out as well. So Canva Sheets, start playing around, see what cool things you can create, and I'll see you soon.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that. Spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas. Think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past.